this is about to be the one and only team preview I kick off for us. Weird, I don't know, but it's my Commanders, Washington Commanders. Shocked to be in the position I'm in today, where I'm excited about a Commanders season because it's been a rough life for me as a Commanders fan. But yeah, Jaden Daniels comes in last year, burst onto the scene. We rip off our first playoff appearance in a couple years since the Taylor Heineke year, I believe, where he started in the game against the Buccaneers in the playoffs.
He had one of the greater playoff plays I've ever seen.
The dive for the pylon.
Yeah,
that was sick. Actually, I was watching it earlier today because it came up. It was top 5 Taylor Heineke plays as the Commander. And, of course, I had to watch that. That was number 1.
Okay, of
yeah.
course.
The other ones were, like, low-key. I was like, okay, you threw a 55-yard touchdown pass, but that was into triple coverage, and, like, there's no way that should have worked. But that kind of was the Taylor Heineke experience.
Yeah, that was how he worked.
And it was fun because low expectations. But then not only do we make the playoffs last year, but we go on a run to the NFC Championship game, stun the Detroit Lions, kind of whip their tails. Not kind of, we legitimately did. It was bad. I was in disbelief. Before falling to the Eagles, last year, as good as we definitely were a team with some holes, which I'll get into in a second. I mean, the run defense was pretty poor. Mm-hmm. We just weren't the most physical team overall on defense, something we look to address this offseason. But another thing I realized when doing research, I just want to toss this out there early on because it kind of stunned me. We have the oldest average roster age in the NFL, which, seeing the fact we're kind of a young team in the sense of, like, we're new to contending, that just doesn't really seem to be the case. But we've actually made kind of a living / a resurgence off getting guys like Zach Ertz on the tail end of their career, guys like Bobby Wagner, guys that still have some juice left in them, but definitely on the tail end. We've kind of brought them in, let them lead this group, give us the last bit of football they have, and we've really capitalized on that. And I think it's been a
25-year-old rookie in Jaden Daniels. Not that he's old by any means, but
sure.
He's not your typical rookie. He's not bringing the average down by any means.
But stuff like that has been huge for leadership and just kind of been a 180 in the culture we've became accustomed to under Dan Snyder. His rendition of the Commanders, where it's just toxic, just reports kind of left and right about him doing sleazy things. So that's been something I've really appreciated. In terms of off-season additions, do you mind going to the spreadsheet when you get a chance?
Yeah.
JP. The one thing I'm worried about going to next season, so we added Von Miller. We traded for Laremy Tunsil. We traded for Deebo Samuel. I like the Laremy Tunsil piece because in this division we're in, you have to have a stout offensive line to win games. You're going to play Micah Parsons. You're going to play that great defensive line we talked about with the Giants, and then the Eagles, same thing, great defensive line. So we trade for him to look to shore stuff up. Jonathan Jones, sign him for the secondary. We just recently signed Von Miller to kind of bolster a pass rush that was not good last year. Mm-hmm. And not only was it not good, but we lost our leading sack guy to the Cowboys in Fowler.
Dante Fowler.
Fowler, thank you. So we bring in an old Von Miller, kind of that other thing I just talked about, right? We find an old guy, hope he has some football juice left, kind of give him one last hurrah. He can ride off into the sunset, play a couple more years of good football. Then we bring in Deebo Samuel, who kind of honestly feels like he maybe is already in that same stretch. I get he's a little bit younger, right? But a bit of a down year. He's getting older. People are worried, has he lost a step? I saw the play of him. They were like, oh, he looks chubby. He can't run. I don't know if y'all saw that online or not. It was him. It was like a routine pass. No one's even guarding him. He just like wasn't running it out. But people were like, man, he looks thick. He looks overweight. Da-da-da-da. I'm not being the most concise here, but I'm going to go and throw out a first question before I spiral too much. Oldest roster in the NFL, is there any worry that comes back to bite them this year as those old guys look to have to give another year of production at that same level and hopefully stay healthy, which is a concern for older guys?
Sanders, you want it?
That's a tough question for me to answer because I kind of feel like I answered it when I made my Pittsburgh Steelers picks because I feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers have done made some comparable choices, bringing in an Aaron Rodgers, bringing in a Jalen Ramsey, bringing in not a DK Metcalf is not old, but he's probably late 20s, like 29, 30, probably drafted in 2018, 2019, I believe.
I don't think he's any older than 26, sir.
Really? All right, well, JP, you can look that up, and I'm going to talk.
It's 27.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, 28, 29, 27. Close enough.
30.
Yeah. It's
31.
Just specifically, though, on that defense with Cameron who's the Pittsburgh Steelers interior defensive
Cam
line?
Hayward.
Thank you, Cam Hayward. I feel like I kind of made those picks, and I was like, oh, I don't see the old players and the experience working out for the Steelers, and I look at the Commanders team, and I don't want to like be contradictory, and so I'm trying to think of a way that I can say like it's going to work out for y'all.
Would just be like Jayden Daniels is a top 7 QB in the league, and
I'm
that can make
I'm
up
just
for a
going to be
lot.
contradictory and say I don't see it backfiring unless
Oh, you
all of
clearly
your
don't.
experience. True, this is true. I have them with the best record out of the three of us, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't see it backfiring unless you run into the issue of all of your experience hitting a wall and aging out at the same time. So you see Zach Ertz, like you run into the unfortunate situation where Zach Ertz and Von Miller and Bobby Wagner and Marshawn Lattimore all kind of, you see that age show up this season, and then all of a sudden your best attribute is now also your biggest weakness, where it's, well, now my Marshawn Lattimore just can't hang with guys like CeeDee Lamb or AJ Brown or the Giants wide receiver. I forget.
Neighbors.
Thank you, Malik Neighbors. I just forget names. Like now your best cornerback can't hang with the wide receivers he's supposed to be guarding, and now
Yeah.
Bobby Wagner can't guard Dallas Goedert. So I think that's the only way I see it backfiring, is if your biggest strength in that experience and that maturity also becomes your biggest weakness.
Sure.
I really like that point. I think it's a good point. For me, I'm a semi-professional gambler, and so I am really big on the law of averages. And so for me, my concern with these moves is, like you said, they continue to do this where they bring in these aging veterans. I'm concerned if it will work again. Like, does it just continue to work with guys like Laramie Tunsil and Debo Samuel and Von Miller? I'm just curious if it will work again. And I think Sanders makes a great point with, yes, these are great names and they're aging, but does their age show this season? We'll see if that happens. Offensive line, I think, is going to be under question. Sam Cosmi tore his ACL late in the season, so he's not going to play for much of the season. So the interior of the offensive line is not necessarily really good. Laramie Tunsil, and then they're probably going to start Josh Connerly.
That's my guess. I don't know.
Or
why
they'll start Andrew Wiley. We'll see.
I don't know how you can spend a first round. It was a late first round pick. I feel like when your offensive line was a need that needed to be addressed. I don't know how you can spend a first round pick on a need like that and then not start him.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll start him. I will say, of course, I'm blanking on the exact positions now, but when they drafted him, there was talk of them looking to move him. And so, like, if there were some growing pains in that, like, it may take him a moment and you can't start him immediately.
Yeah.
You know, how that looks.
Yeah, we'll see.
That may just be either he's not great. And tackle is one of those where the majority of tackles are not going to be a Penei Sewell, and even Penei Sewell I don't think was elite his first year. I can't remember, but he's an elite guy now. Tackles typically in offensive line take a year or two to adjust to the NFL environment.
Sure.
And so,
which if you slide him inside to cover,
yes.
I'm not saying it's easy to play guard, but the transition may.
Yeah, it's typically easier. Could
Yes.
help that adjustment, and so that might be one of those things where you're kind of starting him, and it's just a deal with it. It's going to look rough this year, which is not ideal, and he might still be better than your potential starter in Andrew Wiley, but that might be a situation where the Commanders are in a kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place where Josh Connolly is younger and he's more talented, but he's also younger. So you're going to have to deal with some of those growing pains and some of the inexperience there.
But they're going to have to get it figured out because you can't. Well, I mean, I already said you can't put out a weak offensive line in this division and expect to put up a lot of points.
Agreed.
So,
I'm not sure if I like it. It's another thing on the gambling thing of now I've seen precedent for it. So will they break the precedent? And the precedent is C.J. Stroud and the Texans, after his really good first season, they make the postseason and they win a playoff game. They go and get Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And they go and get Joe Mixon, and they try to give him the weapons or bolster the defense or bolster the offensive line. And then last season, it doesn't necessarily work out. Now, Stephon Diggs got hurt, but Mixon was really good for them, but he wasn't necessarily a huge jump from
Sure.
the season before with Devin Singletary at tailback. I'm curious if is that something that's going to happen for the Commanders this season, where they bring in Laramie Tunsil to add to the offensive line, they draft another offensive tackle, and then I really want to see how Terry McLaurin plays in a contract year where he hasn't gotten that extension. That's a huge question in the organization and in the fan base. And then Deebo Samuel as well, who got the third most money guaranteed this year out of any wide receiver behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, but is in a 1-year deal, and he's going to be in a prove-it deal because if he plays well, he'll earn that the next contract, but he's got to play well to earn that. So I think that's where it's going to help them because Stephon Diggs got the money, and then it just wasn't necessarily that he was motivated,
Sure.
and then he gets hurt, unfortunately. Deebo and Terry, I think, are going to be extremely motivated because they want to get paid.
Yeah.
And Terry, in my eyes, and your eyes, of course, Terry deserves to get paid.
100%
And
agree.
Deebo, of course, thinks he deserves to get paid. So I think it will help them. But I've seen the precedent with the Texans last year, and I guess I throw it back to you. Do you fearful that you could see something like that, which in large part was injury-related, but they were super aggressive, and now those pieces that they were super aggressive about, Stephon Diggs isn't even there anymore.
Yeah.
Is that something you fear for the Commanders?
It's definitely a worry for multiple reasons. We definitely want to make some moves. You already said them, so I'm not going to restate them. But also just the fact of like the schedule gets a little harder, the pressure ticks up. We kind of become a media darling. People love this team. People love Jaden Daniels, and so that puts us in this spotlight that we're not at all used to being in. Can we perform to the same level? One of my questions on there is, does Jaden Daniels, does he avoid the sophomore slump that's become pretty common, something that kind of befell C.J. Stroud, though I largely don't think it was entirely his fault, but still, do the numbers dip sophomore year? Is there tape on him? People figure it out. Another year in Cliff Kingsbury's offensive system, which doesn't always have the best lifespan, stuff
Sure.
like that. So it definitely is a concern. The thing I'll say about it is, and I know this is just a this season preview, but we've done a pretty good job about making moves while keeping long-term flexibility open, talking about the 1-year deal with Deebo Samuel in terms of like, if stuff doesn't work out, we can go, that sucks, move on, pivot somewhere else down the line. Obviously, like, you can only do that so many times before your window runs out. But we've not shoehorned ourselves in with all of these moves in terms of now all of a sudden we're in trouble and, the ship is sunk before it really even got off the dock, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess, what do you expect from Jaden Daniels year 2?
I expect him to be really good. I think it's funny that JP used the Laramie Tunsil example, or used the Houston Texans example, because Laramie Tunsil was part of that O-line last year, and now this O-line. But I will say he did just post his best run block grade and his second best pass block grade, according to PFF, of his career. So I don't know that Laramie Tunsil was necessarily the issue there. I expect another great year from him on that offensive line to kind of take care of Jaden Daniels' blind side. And I don't expect a sophomore slump. I do kind of expect it. And even C.J. Stroud, I would say he had a sophomore slump, but in his defense, it wasn't just the Stephon Diggs injury. It was also the Nico Collins injury. And then, is Tank Dell hurt now?
Tank Dell is the guy that blew his
out
whole
his
knee is
knee.
gone.
Play this
Yeah.
year.
So their top 3 wide receivers all missed time last season. And that's just a hard thing.
Sure.
While you're still, I don't know if he was ever down to just one of those guys, but even if down to just 2, it's just, it kind of just, I'm sure, wrecks your mindset of
He was
like,
just down to Nico. For
Was
the
it down to just
final
Nico?
5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the offensive line wasn't great. There's a lot of reasons for it. I do think there's a world. I feel like we've talked about injuries so much on this show, but this is not the most deep skill position team,
No.
right? If something happens to Terry, then Deebo Samuel becomes your wide receiver 1, and I don't necessarily know if I trust him to be able to do all of that, right? Maybe he bounces back and can. The running back room isn't anything special. Brian Robinson's the lead back. He's fine, but he's not necessarily someone that like anyone loves. And then if he goes down, it gets bad quick. An older Austin Eckler that, once
Yeah.
again, we're trying to let him ride off into the sunset. I'll say it now. I put it on the guys we drafted. Our 7th-round pick, gosh, can you pull it up? I'm blanking on it. It's like
That's right.
McCroskey Merritt.
Krosky Merritt.
Krosky Merritt. once again, y'all are my fantasy league, so I feel bad saying this. He's a fantasy sleeper for me. I think he's someone that could work up to second on the depth chart. He started off last year really hot, great numbers. PFF guy Sanders, great PFF grades, but played 2 weeks and had a season-ending injury. But he's a guy I watched the tape. I think he can bring something to this running back room and find a way to make an impact there in a deep league. But yeah, it's not really the best running back room, so it's not even something that they can rely on if Terry goes down and it's like we got to pivot to leaning on Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler to win us games.
I think the most not most this is not a like intriguing from an impact point of view, but just from I forgot he existed is Michael Gallup. And this is just a brief tangent, but Michael Gallup is a guy who, I mean, in 2018, 2019, he was part of that wide receiver room in Dallas that was maybe one of the best. It was like the best 1-2 punch in the NFL, or
Sure.
at least up there, like top 3, top 5. And then like 3 years later, wasn't on the team anymore. So that's just a fall from elite part of an elite room to now he's the third string in behind Terry McLaurin.
I don't entirely know how old he is and how much he'll play, but he's yet another guy. It's like, hey, let's bring this guy that's kind of been around the league, give him another chance, see what we can get out of him. Yet another example of that. So,
Yeah.
What I'm really curious to see, and I don't hope we have to see it for Commander's sake, but if Debo or Terry get hurt, I want to see does Jaden still play well?
yeah.
That's my first question, and like my only really question. I view Jaden. I think the way he played last season, he's right there in the top 5 already, because he was just
In the not just the NFC,
in the
but
NFL. I think he's the best quarterback in the NFC. I want to see him play without the great weapons, and if he plays well in that spot, then it's like, okay, the sky's the limit. We've got
Sure.
our quarterback going forward if we just can keep him healthy and keep him out of harm's way. I'm really curious, do we get to a spot in the season where that is a question of, can Jaden be the guy that he fully carries the team to a victory? Because I think even in C.J. Stroud's case last year, which we've used an example as a ton, yeah, he still played well in the games where it was, even if it was just Nico Collins or just Stephon Diggs, he was fine. Now, the numbers weren't great, but they won games, and that's really all I'm worried about, is if those guys go down, does Jaden still carry them to wins? Doesn't matter if he plays great. Does he carry
gotta
them
win
to
games.
wins?
Sure.
Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing you care about at the end of the season is how many games you won. That's where you decide your seeding in the postseason.
What I'd say there is,
And
go ahead. I didn't know.
My last
Go
point
for
would
it.
just be Jaden's never experienced that, because you think to the LSU offense with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., even back with Arizona State, he had Brandon Ayuk and N'Keal Harry as well. So he's had NFL caliber receivers really all of his career.
Sure.
And now in the NFL, he's had Scary Terry and Diami Brown, who was really good last season. And
Make
Zach
some clutch
Ertz
Ks.
was a consistent piece for Jaden and a safety blanket. So we haven't seen that, which
Sure.
is why I bring up that question.
I do think he's good at working with the scheme like Kingsbury gives. Of if it does become a game where there's really not much there, he'll take the check down. He'll make the short throws. They'll scheme some stuff up to get it going. So I'd have optimism if that did happen, that he would find a way to lead the team down the field and try and still generate some points. But Sanders, you kind of look like you had something you
Yeah,
wanted to say.
I don't see the need to be like, oh, I want to see him play without his wide receivers. I would much rather be like, I'd rather just see him throw for 5,000 yards, 40 touchdown. Like that's, I know that's not like, I'm not to like, I do agree that you can learn a lot about a guy by seeing how they do when they are like,
You hope you never have to see.
yeah, they are having to persevere through challenges that they haven't yet experienced. But I would push back and say, like, either you can learn not necessarily the same lessons, but you can, if your goal is to see it, like, if the sky's the limit, if he plays well without one or two of his best weapons, I would say the sky's the limit if he throws for 4,800 yards and 40 touchdowns, like, or 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, and he has two 1,500, 1,800 yard receivers. Like, I think that kind of teaches you the same lesson of like, all right, this is the guy, let's keep him healthy.
I bring it up because you're going to see that.
Yeah.
If Jaden is the quarterback in Washington for 10 years, you're going to see that.
Yeah.
And he has to be good enough to win games without that. Think of Mahomes. that was the biggest question going to the season. The year they lose Tyreek Hill, is he still going to be good? And they won the damn Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And not to compare Jaden to that, but that is what now separates the elite from all-time greats, and that's why I bring it up, because I want to I want to see that in Jaden.
Yeah.
I think he's got the potential to do that.
You're saying that as a praise almost more than
Yes.
anything. Sure.
I think he's got the ability to do it, but that is for me the only question I have. I don't have any worries about. I think he's gonna do and have seasons like that where he throws for 4,800 yards and he has 40 total touchdowns. I'm not worried about that. He's got the talent to do that. I reckon we're gonna see it. I mean, his numbers weren't eye-popping last season. It was the plays he would make down the stretch of games and the elite throws here and there.
Sure.
I'm not worried about him having a great season. I'm just worried about, is he good enough to win with when he's down to one weapon, which I think we have a chance to see because the depth isn't there from a skill position.
Yeah, they didn't really have their all-in offseason yet to me, where they were like, all chips to the table, let's go win this thing.
Right.
I want to pivot to the defense real quick because
Sure.
we can all agree it was not a great defense last year, especially on the defensive line. Thinking about some of the games they had against Saquon Barkley that they got pretty ugly, which no one really stopped Saquon, right? But like those are just the examples that come to my mind. Secondary wasn't even great, right? It was kind of a piecemeal together unit. Some of these older guys that we've talked about, some younger guys. I want to shout out Frankie Louvu. I'm a fan. I think he's a really nice player. My boy Jackson Carter's a guy. Mikey Sanders still out of Michigan, made some big plays. But I don't really feel like that they made huge strides to upgrade that unit, right? They spent their first-round pick on offensive tackle. Their second-round pick was Trey Amos, cornerback out of the school up north. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think will be a good player. I'm not sure if I'm legally allowed to say that on this
you
podcast, but I was a fan of that pick. But then we don't even draft a defensive edge, right? A huge issue of need. So I'm just curious if y'all think the consensus is like this defense will take a step forward this year, just kind of because we did make some moves. But like, is it really going to be good enough for it to get stops in key games in the playoffs or even in big regular season games, right? Or does that just not matter because you think the offense is going to be able to be good enough to make it?
I don't think the offense is necessarily
I don't think so
gonna be
either.
good enough. And so I do think it is a huge question. I think this is, for me, I'm lower on them than they were from a record perspective last season, not necessarily from a team perspective. And it's a large part because they're going to be in a lot of tough, competitive games. And it's just, they're going to be under question a ton of, can they win the one-score game? Because, like we've said throughout this entire NFC East prediction, they play tough games as well, just as tough as the other teams, having to play at Lambeau, having to go to the Chargers. They go to Kansas City on Monday Night Football. They go to Miami. They don't go to Miami. They play in Madrid against the Dolphins. They have to play the Denver Broncos this season, and then obviously still having to play their division as well. I think they're just going to be in a ton of spots where they're going to be in close games, which I pray for you. And from a heart perspective, of all the close games you're going to have to deal with this season, I think it's going to be that kind of season for them.
Sure.
And I think my only fear for you and for the Commanders is, are we going to look up at the end of the season and they're going to be 8-9, and we're like,
Yeah, how'd that happen?
damn, if we made one play here and one play there, and that may have even been the case last year. Like, if the Hail Mary doesn't happen, do they go on that run? Do they gain all of that confidence?
Yeah.
That is, again, that's another one where I want to see an evolution of Jaden in that locker room, and I want to see an evolution of Dan Quinn as a head coach.
Sure.
If you can play through this brutal schedule, when you come around to next year and the year after, where the schedule's gonna be easier than this next year or the year after, it has to be. If they manage to make the playoffs, that's the biggest thing for the season. If they can make the playoffs, they can beat anyone. They showed that last year, and they were really in their first rendition of this kind of team and organization. So that's the biggest question for me. Or are we going to look up at the end of the season and say, shit, we're 7-10. Why did we not make the postseason?
Yeah.
And then we're going to be in a ton of questions in the offseason, and they may make moves they don't have to.
Yeah.
I'm nervous about that from a Commanders perspective, which is why I have them going 10-7. Y'all don't see that happening, having them going 13-4, Sanders, and 12-5. Is there a reason that you see them winning all of these tough games? Because it's, quite frankly, it's a brutal schedule in the NFC East this season.
Yeah, I don't feel like they lost enough coming from this season, from last season to this season, to lose any of that momentum or any of that chemistry. I feel like they retained a lot of the important pieces and then also added some pieces. And I guess I'm betting on those pieces clicking, because I don't think those pieces are those pieces. I feel like are secondary pieces that will be in addition to the primary pieces. A guy like Deebo Samuel, and I think that's going to be like an addition. A guy like Javon Kinlaw to help out on that defensive line, and then I see that those being not necessarily like the pivotal pieces or the foundational pieces, but the sprinkles on top. And so that's why I kind of, because their season is not dependent on those guys, there's less pressure on those guys, and therefore I see that more likely those guys succeed because they can play without that same pressure of they are like, you have to be good or else we're not making the playoffs. Because
Sure.
we didn't have you last year. We didn't have Von Miller last year, and they still went to the NFC Championship. So that's kind of why I see it being and I mean, they did lose some pieces. They did lose the sack leader in Dante Fowler Jr., but I see it working out for them. I see the sprinkles on top being enough to win 13 games.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have them 12-5. I'm a Commanders fan, so I wasn't going to not have them win this division going into my predictions, right? But you talked about this maybe a season where they're under a lot of fire and a lot of close games, and we're going to need to see progression from Jaden Daniels and him become a leader. And I can confidently say there's no one I'd rather have
Oh, yeah.
to lead our team and to grow as a leader and to just play well under fire than Jaden Daniels. Like, I've fallen in love with the guy, as so many people have. It's just kind of this special player, both physically, but really, in my opinion, he's really special between the ears. The mental aspect of his game has really impressed me as a rookie. I know he's an older rookie, but to still come in and play with the poise he did as a rookie in the National Football League just really impressed me. And I think he's a guy that, he gets into some tough spots. The team's in some tough spots. They need someone to make a speech, get some momentum going. He's the guy I want. And so that's why I still have them, despite some roster questions and me maybe liking them. I would have liked them to improve the roster more. I still have them going 12-5.
I think they'll get it done. And the stats back up your point. Last season as a rookie, Jaden Daniels had 5 fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. That is for a rookie, like that's poise, that's doing it. Those are against the Giants, the Bears with the Hail Mary, the Eagles, the Falcons, and then against Tampa Bay, where and that game was very close down the stretch, and then he leads a big drive in the fourth quarter. So I agree 100%. Jaden is the guy I would love to have at quarterback for a season that's going to have a schedule as brutal as it is for the Commanders.